Welcome to the City of Bakersfield Planning Commission meeting. This television broadcast is brought to you by the local cable companies, the County of Kern, and the City of Bakersfield. You can watch the rebroadcast of this meeting Saturday at 7 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. The agenda for this meeting can be downloaded at www.bakersfieldcity.us. Presiding over this evening's meeting, Chair Daniel Cater.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to call to order the March 16th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Cater,
Yes? Oh, here, sorry.
Vice Chair Bassatash,
Here.
Commissioner Biddle,
Here.
Commissioner Coman,
Here.
Commissioner Lomas,
Here.
Commissioner Neal,
Here.
Commissioner Wade.
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you all for attending tonight's Planning Commission meeting. First of all, I want to apologize if I'm off tonight. All the microphones are on the opposite side of the dais, and it is making me realize what a creature of habit I am. And so it feels a little bit like I'm living the day in backwards. But this commission provides an opportunity for public participation in the development process throughout the city of Bakersfield. The Planning Commission considers a wide variety of projects, including subdivision maps, zone changes, general plan amendments, and much more. When applications are received, the Planning Division analyzes the request. Planning staff will present the facts about the project, along with their recommendation to the Planning Commission, who will approve the item or make a recommendation as appropriate. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda Item 3, Public Statements.
Does anyone in the audience wish to address the Commission regarding items listed on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, does anyone in the audience wish to address the Commission regarding items not listed on tonight's agenda? If so, please come forward and state your name. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda Item 4, Consent Calendar Items.
All matters listed under consent items do not require a public hearing and will be enacted by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of said items unless staff or a commissioner request specific items be discussed and or removed for separate action. May I get a motion adopting consent items?
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Bashir Tash, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Biddle. Commissioners, please cast your votes. Oh, Commissioner Neal's computer seems to be frozen.
Can we do a roll call vote?
Let's do a roll call. That sounds great.
Commissioner Cater,
Yes.
Commissioner Bassatash,
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Biddle, Commissioner Coman, Commissioner Lomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Neal,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda Item 5, Consent Public Hearings.
Now is the time for consent public hearing items. Please note if the item is not removed by a commissioner, staff, or member of the public, the commission will vote on all items in a single motion without further comment. If an item is removed, it will be placed at the end of the non-consent public hearing items. At this time, I will open all of the consent public hearing items. Does any member of the audience or the public wish to remove a consent public hearing item? Seeing no members of the public wishing to remove an item, does any commissioner or staff wish to remove a consent public hearing item? Seeing no commissioners or staff, at this time the consent public hearing items 5A and 5B are now closed. May I get a motion to adopt staff's recommendation on the consent public hearing items not removed, incorporating all staff memorandum and revised staff recommendations?
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Bashir Tesh. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Neal. Commissioners, please cast your votes. Should we do roll call or digital?
Does the system work now?
No,
No.
it's actually a little bit further behind than it was before. So let's do a roll call.
Chair Cater,
Yes.
Vice Chair Batratash. Yes. Commissioner Biddle,
Yes.
Commissioner Komen,
Yes.
Commissioner Neal,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade.
Yes.
Motion approved.
You forgot Commissioner Lomas.
Commissioner Lomas,
Yes.
motion approved.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 6, non-consent public hearings.
We don't have any non-consent.
We don't,
public
yeah.
hearings. We don't.
I don't believe we have any tonight. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 7, workshops.
Mr. Johnson, would you please provide us with the workshop item?
Yes, a couple items. I'm going to have the Development Services Director, Christopher Boyle, come down to present. But I would like to thank the members of the audience. I'm sure you're here for the educational part of it, so we appreciate that you're attending. If you need an agenda to show that you were here and there's not enough in the back, let us know and we can get you one.
All right.
With the Planning Commission. And it's even more exciting now knowing you've got additional training opportunities. I've watched your commission grow and become more educated in the topics of the commission. Last year's commission on housing and housing being so topical. It's great to know that I've seen you in action, and you really are one heck of a planning commission. And I mean that with all sincerity. I wasn't buttering anybody's bread. Doesn't matter what anybody tells you. Today or tonight, I will have my usual problems with the computer. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I think this is the third time I've used this introductory slide. By law, as you know, we're required to make a presentation on our annual housing progress report as required by HCD, and do that in advance of the required April 1st upload to my favorite state department, the Department of Housing and Community Development. This year's annual housing progress report will be the last year of our 5th cycle. So we're able to look at production this last year and then relate it to conclusions about our 5th cycle efforts. Next year will be the 1st cycle of the 6th cycle. We'll have a brand new housing element, and we'll look at where we are in the housing element progress and where we need to be by the end of the year. We'll look at legislation. Legislation is always topical. If you follow Sacramento, and I appreciated Commissioner Neal bringing some of that legislation to the fore at our last public hearing. It shows someone's engaged in the process and educated on legislation. And also want to thank our city attorney for being so fully backgrounded on legislation that's coming to the city of Bakersfield. And lastly, we'll take a look moving forward as to where the city is, where the city should be. Without further ado, last year we produced 1,192 units, and of those, 50 of them were very low. So essentially, 96% of all units that we produced were market rate and above. Not a great year. I could rationalize that in any one of a number of reasons, similar to the fact that our market rate production was down, whether it was supply chain, whether it's financing. Affordable housing struggles with financing, no different than market rate builder struggles with
interest rates and the like, but the bottom line is it was not a good year for housing in the city of Bakersfield. That's very different than last year. When we had these reports, we don't really know where we stack up against other municipalities in the state, but as it turned out, last year, our 2,521 units of production was the #1 builder of dwelling units in the state of California, even eclipsed Los Angeles, who typically takes on #1. That included all single-family and multifamily units, at all scales of affordability. That's a really great accomplishment for the 9th largest city in the state of California, and we should celebrate that, whether it's a year ago or otherwise. We take a harder look at the 5th cycle totals. When you look at the columns, column 3 there with the blue heading, total units to date, all years, that's for 8 years of production, and the VL, L, M, and AM stand for low, very low, moderate, and above moderate. We see that for very low units, we produced 560 units, and that was only 5.7% of our required RHNA. For low, we produced 141 units, only 2.4% of our required regional housing need allocation, or RHNA, as I'm using the acronym. Moderate did much better, 68.3%, and then above moderate, we came in at about 3/4, at 74.6% of the total assigned regional housing need allocation assigned to the city of Bakersfield. At the time, we had 36,660 units that were assigned by Kern COG and as approved by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. And in the end, we came in averaging 1,975 units a year, and that only accomplished 43.5% overall for the total regional housing need allocation that was assigned to us. In essence, even though we did almost 2,000 units per year on average over an 8-year span, we needed to average 4,537 units to be in full compliance with our allocation per the State Department of Housing and Community Development. I always throw in a look at projects that are done and that will be done. We did complete the 22nd Street lofts this last week. That was this last year. That was 20 affordable units at 22nd and Q. We have projects nearing completion. This project probably would be done if it not for supply chain problems. This would be Sagewood Apartments at Berkshire and Stein. That would be 72 units that we would have been able to count, but those units are not quite finalized, and occupancy hasn't been provided. So that's very close to nearing production, and I guess the good news is we can count it towards the 6th cycle. Renaissance at Baker, we talked about that last year, and that project has not moved forward. That's 84 units. And very topical in the news lately is the CityServe project at 127 units at Golden State and F. That project has not had permits issued to date. So that's really a look at where we were with the 5th cycle, touch base on the 6th cycle. Let's move forward into the 6th cycle now in terms of digging a little bit deeper. Last year, I used this quote that once upon a time, regional housing need allocation was a target, but more and more today, there is a real concern that it becomes a state mandate. And if you looked at our performance over the 5th cycle, that's just a little bit concerning, because if compliance with RHNA is attached to having a certified housing element, and we have such a tremendous shortfall, even though we place so much emphasis and effort as a city organization in providing housing, we have to do everything we can to produce more, and to produce more is one of those nuances. I'm not sure how we're going to be able to do that. We are a development-friendly city. There isn't a house that someone that wanted to build that I didn't let them build in the last 8 years. So we'll talk about moving forward in a while, but let's do the math. Our 6th cycle regional housing need allocation is 37,461 units, which is a rise over the 5th cycle. It means that we must produce 18,211 low and very low units over the 8-year cycle. That's 2,277 units a year per the regional housing need allocation. We must produce 19,250 moderate and above moderate units. That's just shy of 18,000. It's over 18,000 out of the number on the top of my head. The number that worries me is the 2277. And so, but that's a rise. And we were kind of thought that the early news from HCD was that the target number would go down. But our number did not go down. Our number went up. And although the overall number of units assigned to the county is a little more than 10,000 less than the fifth cycle, our number here in Bakersfield went up essentially 900 units. So it's a real lift. If you look at what we're assigned to do when we compare the county overall, we are assigned 76% of the overall low and very low income categories for the county overall. If you look at it a little harder, county's about 8,100 square miles, city's about less than 2% of that, about 1.8% of the overall acreage, but we are assigned 76% of that target. That's a hefty lift. You know, it frustrates me, and I've said it before, I like to win. I like to win. When you step on the basketball court, you want to win. You step on any court in life, you don't step out there and say, it's a good day to lose. And, but these are really hard numbers to really, to project out and say, how am I going to win? At this point in juncture, I'm not sure how. We'll go down swinging, and we have a lot of things that we'll talk about as it relates to being able to produce these kind of numbers. But these are numbers that we did not even make during a building boom. So we also need to create 19,250 market rate units. That's 57% of the county overall. And so our total, compared to the countywide numbers that are assigned to the various municipalities in the unincorporated areas of the city, is 65% of the overall 57,650 units that are assigned to Kern County. There are some bleak realities there. So you look at the fifth cycle, we averaged 1,975 units annually. We needed to average 4,537. We built only 4.5% of the affordable housing that we were required, that we weren't required, that we targeted to build. That was our goal to build. There wasn't a requirement to meet RHNA. With the sixth cycle, total housing production needs to now be 4,682 units. So, and low and very low needs to go to 2,277 and 2,406 units above moderate. So if you look at it from a comparison as to what we built averaged over the last 8-year period versus what we must average over the next 8-year period, you have a tangible shortfall of 2,700 plus units annually. That's really the challenge at hand. And a ton of those units, we really must find ways to build more affordable housing for the citizens of the city of Bakersfield. That completes my presentation on the sixth cycle and the goals at hand. We will complete our sixth cycle as mandated by law by December 31st of this year. And that sixth cycle housing element will contain many strategies, all strategies necessary to implement the housing element and realize as much housing capacity as the market will bear. Remembering that the city doesn't build any houses. The market builds houses. And so when you have a soundbite coming from Sacramento that says the city must build more houses, I'm going to tell you quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, that I didn't build a single house last year. The market built all of them. And so it's discerning. That's a soundbite from Sacramento. So let's talk about Sacramento and legislation. So I love these graphics. The graphic here before you, and you're not asked to read every last one of these things. These are all of the legislation that was proposed in Sacramento only in the last legislative session for 2022, okay? These are just housing related. You can see the headings. There's housing and homelessness and ADUs and you name it. These are how many went to the governor's desk. And these are how many were signed by the governor. Now, I'm just going to take a brief break and look at just the ones that related to the housing element and to zoning. General plan element. The one that I'm so glad wasn't signed says that it would allow the state to find and rezone cities that don't zone enough land for apartments. This is a general trend that's happening in Sacramento, where land use authority is usurped from local agencies and assumed by the state of California, usually with a some sort of cost incentive that I guess is intentional to resolve the problem. I'm glad that Governor Newsom didn't sign that bill, because that isn't taking a solutions-based approach to providing solutions to affordability in the state of California from this humble servant's perspective. But there's, let's look at the bottom two. Bloom, unmet housing goals from previous planning cycles are carried over and added to the goals of the next planning cycle. I am so hopeful that that isn't my fifth cycle shortfall of 2,707 units annually, attached to my 4,600 plus units that must be built as part of the sixth cycle. I am very, very hopeful. I think the entire department might drink some Kool-Aid if our new target is something like 7,300 units annually. And then AB 2653, Santiago, allows state to reject cities' housing element annual reports if they don't meet state guidelines. I want to champion my staff's efforts. We prepare our annual reports, we double check them, and then we submit them on time. And so I'm not really too concerned with AB 2653. Thank you, Planning Department, City of Bakersfield. Zoning, some of the usual suspects, Ms. Caballero. Housing and office retail zones, union labor required. We talked about that last week. These are laws that might work very, very well when labor unions are utilized. It's a way to incentivize development, but it comes at a certain cost. You can almost read between the lines in terms of who sponsored the bill out of Ms. Caballero's office. AB 211, streamline approval of housing with at least 15% affordable units. This is oftentimes called inclusionary zoning. And, you know, I was just topical today because the city manager's office did ask me to provide a brief on what other cities are doing in terms of adopting inclusionary zoning. It can be very problematic. AB 682, density bonuses for co-housing with shared kitchen. These are ways to incentivize more shared housing opportunities, to provide for more housing opportunities for targeted populations, as is AB 1551, the density bonus for mixed-use commercial projects. You'll note that in our upcoming housing element and the rezoning that's being done associated with it, the city is proposing to have mixed-use by right corridors in the city where underutilized commercial properties will have the opportunity by right to redevelop with either multifamily as a standalone use or as a mixed-use component. So there's no taking from that individual property owner who has a commercially zoned property that may or may not be in full utilization. It's actually an additional opportunity for that property to entertain either adding a residential component or converting perhaps an underutilized or bare dirt commercial property into a residential use. Those are the kind of techniques that we're entertaining in looking to meet and satisfy our RHNA targets. So we're looking at all opportunities to provide for additional housing. And it's kind of like housing like this. When you look at this aerial photograph, you probably say, oh, look at LA. Or maybe you look at Bay Area. But you're looking at Central Valley. And you're looking at something that was built in the middle of the housing collapse. So, and within this, there are multiple types of houses built at multiple densities, and they all live in conjunction with one another. It is all single-family residential. The red lots, they're 2,400. The oranger lots up in the the dark orange lots that are to the south of the red, in between the bright yellow, those are 3,200 square foot lots. The light orange in the upper right corner, that's 4,000 square feet. The bright yellow lot is a 4,500 square foot product. The kind of squared off medium light green, that's 6,000. It's a gated community. All the bright green stuff, that's 7,500 square foot lots. And that big blue lot that looks like Bakersfield, those are 12 to 14,000 square foot lots. And isn't it amazing? They're situated right across the street from 2,400 square foot lots. It all works together, and all of it's the missing middle that we don't build, except for that blue swath right there. And I really challenge the development community to bring me this type of development, and I would challenge my planning commission to approve it, because these are the types of products that the community doesn't have and should and will most definitely embrace. I was researching this presentation, and I ran into an old photograph of this community. I was the master planner for this, administrator to this master development plan, and when I was a much younger guy. And I found these old pictures of when it was coming out of the ground, and I kind of chuckled because it came out of the ground based on demand. They built 7 different model centers, so you could go buy a single family home in that bright green. Model centers of every single product you see here, there was a model center you go to. But it was a phase map, and you could record phase after phase based on what was building. And the picture demonstrated what I recalled, which was all that red stuff, you couldn't build enough of it because it introduced an opportunity for home ownership that maybe wasn't there before. Being able to buy a freestanding house on a 2,400 square foot lot introduced a ton of people with the opportunity to build equity in a home that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford. So it's a matter of scale. And again, I want to continue to encourage my development community. This is what it looks like today. So, and I look in that upper right-hand corner, and I kind of chuckle because just in that corner, you can see 6 rooftops. Those are all 2,400 square foot lots. All the garages are on garage courts, so it's shared driveways. 2 stories. Everybody's got a 2-car garage. If we look at the lower right-hand side, you can see there's community pathways that provide for outdoor recreational opportunities. If I went back to the original aerial here, if you looked really hard, you'd see all these small parks that provided open space opportunities for these individuals, because it's mostly shared open space, not a lot of private open space. This is what it looks like today. Built about 17 years ago. The largest lot in that photograph is in the upper right-hand corner. It's 4,000 square feet. As I digress, we also don't have much of this. This is an APA photograph straight off the American Planning Association website. Missing middle. I challenged my development community to build some of this, where we have verticality, where we have density. In fact, we have mixed use in the bottom right-hand corner photograph. Love to see some mixed use where whether it's a daycare or a small market or what have you, they begin to build those neighborhoods that we hear conceptually about, the 15 or 20-minute neighborhood that planning speak nowadays is talking about. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some breakout sessions for that conference that talks about the 15-minute neighborhood as a new type of zoning vision. None of these photographs show anything that's available here in the city of Bakersfield today. Next year, I'd love to be able to show photographs of the new stuff that's being built here in Bakersfield by visionary developers. I want to close my presentation tonight. I know that by now, every one of you has signed up at www.bakersfield2445.com. You want to be at the front end of all those activities that are exciting as the housing element, the general plan, update keep on coming down the pipeline. If you haven't, I want to continue to encourage you to go there so that you're kept averse or updated as to what's going on with the housing element. I wanted to note too that we have a city council study session. It's a joint session between your body and the city council that is coming up. The first one would be on March 22nd, so it's right around the corner next week. That'll be on the general plan and its progress. And then right before the public release, or maybe right after the public release, we'll get that housing element out there as soon as we can. There'll also be an additional study session with the City Council on April 26th specific to the housing element. So if you don't believe me now, because these things are happening, and my super small planning staff continues to keep these projects on time and on schedule. Also like to bring up, we're moving into the spring season, and whereas the RISE team has been kind of quiet during the winter, most definitely because we actually had a winter. These are 4 of our pop-up events where the RISE team will have a presence in these events. And I really, if you have the opportunity to come out and mingle with the populace and see what the RISE team does in their public outreach, really encourage you to attend these. I think they're scattered amongst the various wards of the city, but if you haven't been, if one ward hasn't been touched yet, for sure, we'll get there with the various events that come out in the spring and early summer. Once again, housing element timeline on schedule. We will go to public release here in April at some point in juncture. That completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'd like to get some more information about the development that you had with the smaller lots and the bigger lots. I think it might be advantageous to present that to some people that I know that are looking to develop. I like the way that looked. I think that would be really good. So I'd like to maybe get with you after. And
thank you, Commissioner. I would note that I have I've lost some of my voice in the last 3.5 years, talking about our need to develop more, and in order to develop more, we need to build more at a density. And I've also talked about the added value that comes to the development community as it relates to that. Nothing comes out of the ground unless we make money, and it's a pleasure to see some of the maps that would allow for that to be built. Are at least in conceptual form. I don't believe we may have received one map, Director Johnson, that provides for a mixture of densities as small as 2,800 square feet. And I'm really hoping that's a nod. Yes. So
Yes.
we are working with our development community, and we're hoping that one leads to many. So after this length of time, I came into the city and said, hey, we really need to do this. Boy, I thought we were going to build 3,000 units a year when I got here, and I meant it. We're starting to see that type of product being rolled out, and it's in the nick of time because it provides affordability in a period where there's lots of challenges to homeownership.
yeah, I think the biggest confrontation that we have with stuff like that in the city is you have a lot of developments coming up to bigger developments, and the bigger developments are coming and showing up and saying, we don't want that because we think it's going to do. But seeing those pictures and the way that was built together, and it was just intertwined, it looked beautiful. It had continuity. I think that it would benefit. But I think that developers need to see that. And that's a great picture to present and kind of share with some of the bigger developers in town and people that may want to come in and do something all together at once instead of kind of piecing it together. So thank you again.
Staff has made those are great observations. I've taken my staff on a field trip to visit that. And I have volunteered on multiple occasions to take players in my development community to explore it as well, because it is a good example of what you can do. And you can do it at density, which only adds value to both the developer and to the home buyer. I would also add that we are in the middle of a zoning ordinance update, which will provide for an easier pathway to a smaller lot development. Our zoning ordinance only provides for lots as small as 4,500 square feet by right today. So the map that you will see will come in as a PUD because residential development only can be allowed to be as small as 4,500 square feet here. The zoning ordinance update we're doing will provide for that opportunity in a more streamlined fashion, similar to an R1 residential subdivision. So I appreciate the developers that are coming in, understanding that they have a PUD, they're faced with a PUD. By the same token, if you really want to, as a department, you really want to support smaller lot subdivisions, you have to provide cleaner pathways, and we're doing that with our zoning ordinance update.
Do you have a timeline for when that would be updated?
I do, as a matter of fact. So many wheels, so little time. You know that the housing element needs to be adopted at the end of the year. I've mentioned that we have higher density properties, we have mixed use properties. We don't have that zoning today. The greatest density available in my general plan right now is essentially 17.42 acres, but 17.42 units an acre. And occasionally we bump up against it in an apartment complex, but largely we don't build nearly near to that density. HCD would tell us we build at 3.3 dwelling units an acre on average. I would say that's not sustainable. Currently, in our pipeline projects, we're about a little over 5 dwelling units an acre. And so we're making progress moving into the 6th cycle. Timelines. There are 3 set things that need to happen in order to be in a place where I have a housing element that the city doesn't have a super long list of to-do items and a very short time to do them, which is typically how HCD might provide a certification, a conditional certification. We're in the process of doing a residential zoning update specific to residential only, because we don't have zone districts that HCD requires. For low density projects, or for a home or a dwelling unit to qualify as low density, it must be built in a zone district that's 20 dwelling units or more per acre. For it to be considered a very low income dwelling, it must be at 30 dwelling units or more per acre, and that's per state law. We don't have those zones. We must create them. We need to recreate the R4 to have a 20 units an acre floor. Right now it's 17.42, and then we need to create an R5 at 30 dwelling units an acre. Also, we need to create these mixed use zones. And when you're trying to find 37,461 units, you have to turn over every rock and stone in 151 square miles. As a matter of fact, you need to turn over more than the rocks and stones. We also have 4 annexations proposed that would grow the city by around 2 square miles, which would include the rest of the units we have. We can't find the dwelling units in our 151 square miles. So there's 4 things going on. You've got the housing element going on. You got a rezone going on to rezone those properties into the appropriate zone districts in order to qualify as low, very low, and the like. You have the zoning ordinance update that's ongoing, and you have annexation strategy that's being deployed. The legal descriptions for those annexations is being prepared by an outside consultant right now. So when I say Mr. Johnson's team is working, I mean Mr. Johnson's team is working, and I just want to, again, lift up Mr. Johnson's team for all the great things they're doing.
Commissioner Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle, for that presentation. I liked seeing some of the different types of development, the smaller lots with more density, because I just came back from the Bay Area, and I see that all the time there. And I think that those were beautiful, and I've seen, properties that look exactly like that. So thank you for sharing that. I do have quite a few questions about your presentation, and I think you kind of partially answered one of them. The first is, you said that you don't develop. The city doesn't do any of this development. We're relying on developers to come in and develop the housing to help us meet our RHNA numbers as a city. I guess my question was, and you partially answered it, is what is the city doing to actually meet those numbers? Is there anything else that you didn't mention already?
Well, I've talked about what my department is, my development services department is doing in terms of providing for ability for people to develop units. The city does so much more as it relates to, at least on the affordable housing side. I've never been associated with a city that doesn't place more resources into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, release a notice of funds availability to the development community such that they can provide for applications to access those funds and build projects. All the projects that you saw there, with the exception of the Home Key project at Golden State and F, rely upon some gap financing through the state, through the city of Bakersfield. Mm-hmm. So almost all the units, the city has some touch point, some financial incentive to a developer. As it relates to affordable housing though, there aren't a lot of partners. So when you say, I need to build 2,277, I don't know if there's that many low-income home builders, even in the state. If I moved all of the low-income home builders into Bakersfield for half the year, I might think I might have a shot at it. But there are only so many home builders, low-income developers that we rely upon and partner with in the city of Bakersfield. I was kind of encouraged. You might have been on the website from October 17th to November 15th. The vacant sites inventory was available. You could scroll through it, you could look at it, you could select parcels, and there were low-income developers that were looking at our vacant sites inventory and trying to get an understanding of parcels they might be interested in reaching out to particular home buyers, homeowners, or property owners and looking to go into escrow. And I know of at least 2 properties that are in escrow with affordable builders because there were people that were digging deep into the vacant sites tool to see if there were parcels that they might be interested in going into escrow and then ultimately developing low-income housing. But when you talk about developing affordable housing, there are many colors of money, there are many pots of money, and those pots come to the party at different times. And can only be used for certain things. And what it essentially does is and many of those pots of money require that prevailing wage is paid, so costs of affordable housing go up, sometimes exponentially. But in the end, another cost is the time it takes to assemble all that financing, work through all the local, state, and federal agencies and capitalizing on their various funding sources, using Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars for gap financing, and then having all those assurances that are funding there, and then moving forward towards building permit and ultimately building. That's a good 4-year process. And that's an entirely different timeline than a market rate project. So, but it still doesn't change the fact that although the city looks to partner in every way we can, we ultimately don't have any control over of affordable housing coming to our community. We rely on our local partners, and some of them are more regional. Chelsea, the Housing Authority of County of Kern, that's a partner in affordable housing production, and there are a few others at the same time. Self-help enterprises, Habitat for Humanity. We partner with all those people, but when you look at the pool of those potential builders, because of the complexities of building affordable housing, there's not a lot of them out there. That's quite a struggle. I'm glad to have met 2 new companies that are interested in bringing their skill set to Bakersfield, and we're anxious to help them get there.
Mr. Johnson, is there anything that we can do as a commission to assist the city with speeding up that process?
I would say as a commission, when a project comes to your board for consideration, that a decision is made and it's not referred back or continued, that you just make a decision. And if someone doesn't like that decision, it can always be appealed to city council.
Okay. And you mentioned also that some of the houses in the pictures you showed us or the residences were built on 24 square foot lots, and that we currently don't have as of right that built into our zoning ordinance, but it's something that may be down the pipeline. Is that something that we can actually expedite now, just that portion of the updates?
When you looking at the residential development standards that's going to eventually come across your dais, I guess the short answer is no, because of environmental analysis that's going to accompany the residential zoning update. So in that, there's the process of environmental. This process is the housing ordinance update component is going to be built into the environmental for the housing element update, because it will in large part help satisfy many of the requirements that state law has in place that the city doesn't currently comply with. So in terms of the efficiencies of scale and time, I suppose you could propose one ordinance, but it would still have to fall into a CEQA timeline, and so there wouldn't be any real net benefit to the developer or to the city. We have a best strategy in place, and it's one that has a very constricted timeline when you talk about those 4 elements that we're working on right now. But ultimately, what we expect to get is a zoning code that provides for opportunities to build at those scales in a more by right approach, which is exactly what the state of California is looking for.
Okay. And I'm assuming that we've already looked at cities. I don't know what city that was in that you showed us, but we've already looked to see what other cities are doing to meet these numbers and trying to duplicate that stuff here in Bakersfield.
We watch what other cities are doing, and we watch how they satisfy RENA. And there's only a handful of cities that actually satisfy RENA, which is problematic. I guess you could penalize 70% or 80% of the cities in the state of California for not meeting RENA, noting that not one of those cities was responsible to build a unit. They were responsible to facilitate processes that would allow for processes that saw those units come out of the ground if the market demanded them.
If we were looking at a scale for the cities that have 100% met RENA and 0% met RENA, where are we on that scale?
Well, last 8 years, we satisfied 43.5% of RENA per this presentation.
And other cities, are there other cities that are similarly situated 43%? I mean, what I'm
Yes.
saying is that common for a city to be only at 43%?
Yes.
Or below that?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned that for the low and very low RENA goals for the county, we have 76% of that responsibility. Why do you think that is? Is it our population in this city?
Candidly? Okay. The original numbers that were proposed by KernCog, there was a slight reduction. We were in the 35,000s. And that was in keeping with an expectation from the state that every city their RENA counts would probably go down. But each COG is required to develop formulations associated with affirmatively furthering fair housing and the like. And when our COG inserted those various formulations in, at each iteration of those formulas being added to satisfy specific state mandates, when I would note that their formulations were formally approved by HCD, the city's responsibility went up and then up again. So you ask me, why did that happen? I think when you look at the formulations that are there, and talking from a very sophomoric perspective, trying to simplify the complex, that would be my job, okay? It would be because we did things well. We built a nice city. Most of the city has household incomes that are higher than the county average. So when you look at redistributing affordable housing, where would you put that? You would put that where the standard of living is higher to affirmatively further fair housing in this case. So in a way, Bakersfield is a fine community. It's a place people want to live. And so the way those formulations panned out for Bakersfield, in a way, there are many cities or municipalities in the county of Kern that struggle. Their median household incomes are very low. I can see the rationale. Why would I place more low income in Arvin, and I'm not picking on Arvin, and I don't have their numbers right in front of me in terms of their average median household income. So, or I'll just talk generically, place additional low income housing in communities that have mostly low income housing. If the idea is to distribute that responsibility based on incomes and not based upon the geography, the RHNA counts did that.
I understand.
So I'm not in a place to argue those methodologies. I accept them. I don't really have a choice. Those are how the numbers shook out for me. I expressed frustrations at COG workshops vehemently, I might add.
Well, I just have two last comments, and they're not even questions. One is that it really broke my heart to learn that during a 1 month period in this winter, there were 6 people that died at a homeless shelter. Some of it may have been related to substance abuse, but at least one of them froze to death. And that was scary, and I'm sure it's not unusual. But it's an urgent need for us to be able to find ways to build the low income and the very low housing and the low income housing. And then the other comment I wanted to make is I thank you for presenting those developments that you pull from other cities with smaller lot sizes, because I do truly believe that is a way that we can make living in Bakersfield not just as a renter, but as a homeowner more affordable for the residents of our city. And that's important to me. That's one of the things that I always say, that if you're a full-time working individual, whether you're a low earner at the very bottom of the labor force, or you're making several $100,000s a year, you should be able to afford the home you live in if you otherwise qualify. Your income should not be an impediment to you being able to own the house that your family lives in. So thank you for that. I hope that that's something that actually comes to life in our city, and that we can develop properties with smaller lot sizes and let people own instead of being perpetual renters. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Neal. Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair Cater. Mr. Boyle, thank you very much again for a wonderful presentation. We always appreciate you coming and seeing us. I have a couple of questions that I wanted to just get some clarity on. This 6th cycle, this is also has to be completed by the end of 2024?
2023, this year.
So this is basically projects that are already in the pipeline. I mean, you couldn't come up tomorrow with a new plan and get it done in order to meet this requirement, right?
I wouldn't say that. I think we have something like less than 1,000 units that we can count towards pipeline projects. Okay, the city will process housing entitlements as fast as we can, as we have for the last 8 years, and then we'll add up the counts at the end of the 6th cycle. But you'll also get an annual report. I think right now our pipeline, the number of units that are actively being processed and we can count within the housing element update towards the 6th cycle is just shy of 1,000 units, if I'm not mistaken.
So these are projects, in order to be counted for this, they have to be completed dwelling units.
Right, they have to be completed dwelling units.
So
per the
basically,
APR.
you already have to be under construction now to be able to meet this requirement by the end of the year.
In certain instances, I think a single-family home comes out of the ground about 3 months, 4 months. Depends on supply chain, but if everything was perfect, if you could buy all the things you needed to build a house, houses come out of the ground about 4 months. The house I bought came out of the ground in about 4 months in 2019. So, I would argue that the timeline to single-family construction is shorter than the timeline to multifamily construction.
But these would need to be approved lots at this point. I mean, where we're in March. So they would need to be approved lots, and you need to have site work and all these things done on the lots to get them to where you could build. Do we have that many residential lots that are already, ready to build on?
City has a significant inventory of lots, residential lots that can be built in and are being built on right now.
Okay.
I'll take you on a tour of the city, Mr.
I'm
Coleman.
sorry?
I'll take you on a tour of the city, Mr. Coleman. There's a lot of stick in the air. Not nearly as much as there was in 2021, but
have we, what about city-owned lots? Any real estate the city owns that's vacant? Are we doing anything about making that property available for builders to build on? We'll give you the lot, you build the building?
the annual progress report has a table where the city must list all city-owned properties. Some of those, I would say most of those properties aren't really suitable for residential development. They're a sliver of the West Side Parkway, this little random piece and things like that. But the city has stood up a vacant and substandard property nuisance special projects team that looks to purchase properties and then ultimately transition those properties into developers' hands to build additional residential units. We're mandated by law, if we own property, that it first must be offered for sale for low-income housing. So we were a little bit disappointed. We were hoping there was tax sale just early this week, and we were really hoping to make some real headway and be able to purchase some lots. I don't think we were able to purchase a single lot in that auction. So that was a frustration. We were excited going in thinking we were going to be able to buy a significant number of properties to begin that process of rehabilitating those properties and placing more affordable housing on them. So it doesn't mean our efforts are over. It just means that we were unsuccessful as it related to tax sale properties, but we'll continue to look to purchase properties wherever we can and to repurpose those properties. We unfortunately have a lot of fires in the community. Many of those are residential fires. We constantly looking to see if those individual property owners would be willing to sell those properties, and we can pass them on to low-income housing. I think we have pretty robust strategies towards creating additional housing in many, many, many different ways. And a lot of those are recently stood up, and we don't think that we really realize the full benefit of those teams yet, but we will.
Thank you. Another question regarding the time for approved tentative maps to be recorded and completed. Has the city looked at changing their policy on that? We continue to get tentative maps that were approved 9 years ago, 10 years ago.
Or longer.
They're longer, that are asking for extensions of time. And so they may have been granted these extensions of time, but the city looked at restricting in the future for maps that they're approving now, how many times you can get an extension for, or at least requiring some action on the lot to qualify for an extension. In other words, you need to have done something at some point.
I would say this. We have many maps that are very old.
Yes.
But by the same token, it's been city council policy to provide 2 separate 3-year extensions above those extensions that would normally qualify for a map. And that's direction from the city council.
I understand that. My question to you was, has the city talked about changing that going forward to get these developers moving on some of these lots?
I don't believe the city council is prepared to add additional extensions, and I would support not providing additional extensions. Comes a time when it's, you know, those types of maps are in the way of people who want to build things.
Right.
And I can only share that in my last city, I sent letters to all the maps that were going to expire and said there will be no additional extensions, and either build or don't, your map will expire. And I only had 3 of those maps expire, and I had a bona fide building boom going on when I left there because I had a bunch of lots that were ready for people to build on, and those impediments, that is to say, those tentative maps that weren't in the development community's hands, that were owned by development interests or investors, were now in developers' hands, and there was land available for people to build houses on. And it was one of the best things that happened in terms of unjamming the log jam per se. But that policy came down from a different council. This council believes in protecting the life of maps, and at this present time, they haven't provided direction to provide additional extensions, and staff continues to advise individuals when their maps expire. And we do have expirations that are occurring. We just have a lot of maps.
I'm almost out of questions, I swear. This question is regarding the maps that we get. That if we talked about, we see a lot of the new maps that come through. There's no mixture, and we ask about it. No, it's just 6,000 square foot lots and building. Have we talked about rejecting those maps if they don't have some kind of mix?
You said there's no what? There's no. I missed the
no diversity
keyword.
in the map. You come in with a map for 170 lots, and they're all 6,000 square foot lots to build houses, and so we're asking, hey, where's the moderate income? Where's the low income? And we're not getting it. And so my question is that we talked about kicking some of those maps out if you don't come in with some diversity in the parcel or in the tract map.
Well, I'm not going to take away from your discretionary authority, but I would note that every map that Director Johnson brings to you is consistent with the city's development standards.
Yeah, most all of them we get are market rate or higher. We're not getting the low income and the moderate income because they're not diverse. They're a large apartment complex in the very northwest, and they're getting $3,000 a month for the apartments. We're building tracts of 170 homes, and they're all 10,000 square foot lots, and estate size homes or upper income homes, and we're not getting the diversity. We had a nice one that came through a year or so ago, and it's out on Palm and Jewetta or wherever it was, and we're hopeful that's going to come to fruition soon. But still, even that really wasn't low income. It was market rate, and they're going to be patio homes. There's going to be small homes. They're just going to be real expensive. And so my point is when somebody brings in a map with 170 lots, it meets the numbers for high income or moderate income or whatever. They're not meeting our other requirements. And so are we looking at kicking some of those out and saying, hey, come back with a better plan, more density, and those kind of things?
I think my answer is still the same. Director Johnson's team brings to you maps that satisfy the development standards of the city of Bakersfield. I can, and God bless America, because I don't think Mr. Johnson's role is to distract or take away an individual property rights to develop the land. That would be counterproductive to the city. What we are doing to encourage additional density is to provide for new development standards that make smaller lot subdivisions easier for the developer to build in the fair city of Bakersfield. And that's really our strategy, to put in place the tools necessary for smaller lot subdivisions to be as easy to develop as subdivisions that are building at 3.3 dwelling units an acre.
If I could add to that, I mean, when maps do come in, yes, we talk to the developers, and a lot of times they'll come in for preliminary discussions, and we'll show them like what Director Boyle showed with the denser and the mixed types of lot sizes. And some do go back and rearrange, and some say, I'm going to submit this map, and if it complies with standards, that's what we bring forward.
Okay.
I suppose the commission could take any action they deemed as appropriate, but staff functions within the four walls of the zoning ordinance and brings to you maps that are consistent with law.
My last comment is I participate in a conference call through Leagues of Cities with planning commissioners and other people. And I don't know what my role is in that, to be honest with you, but I'm involved in that conference call. And one of the struggles that cities are having is that when you get into these smaller parcel developments, you need to create homeowners associations to manage those properties. And then the fees for those homeowners associations are now making those low-income housing not affordable because, you know, insurance and, you know, the cost of maintenance and whatever are so high that, you know, they sometimes have $400, $600 a month HOA dues on top of, you know, whatever home payment you have. And so the question is, what do you know anything about how we can somehow manage that or fix that in our community?
Homeowners association dues and other community facility districts that a particular subdivision may be required to pay either upfront or on an annual basis as part of their tax bills are fully disclosed to a buyer. In the case of the project I showed you, each one of those segments is part of an HOA. And the cost of those HOAs is determinate upon the number of amenities that each of those product types had. And curiously enough, the smallest lots, the most popular lots, and the ones that were most affordable were fully maintained by the HOA. All of that outdoor space in that bottom right corner and the like, everything that was visible to the public right-of-way was maintained by that HOA. So it cost about $100 a month. And that was in $2,007. I imagine there was some sort of escalator associated to COLA. But they were the most popular lots. The key point is that individual property owners have individual wishes. And if you are, and so the whole mechanism of, there's 2 points here. The mechanism of an HOA, it is not a concern of the developer, and it's not built into his costs. It's built into the buyer's costs, and the buyer has to qualify for that development subsequently. Only the recordation of that HOA upon each of those recorded maps really is a burden of the developer that has to be in place prior to lots being finalized. But the other side of the coin is it really is a buyer's choice, and they understand what those costs are coming forward. So I'll put the question back to you. If you had a home, that home right there in the bottom right, originally sold for less than $250,000. Okay, today to buy that house, I pulled that off an MLS a few days ago. It's for sale. It's like $445,000. Okay, but in 2007, with a building boom going on, a person could qualify for that home and And so that was an opportunity they had that they didn't have in many other developments that were there. So you had a lot of first-time home buyers. But you also had other individuals who wanted to move into these smaller lots. Empty nesters who didn't want to take care of backyards anymore. Downsizers who didn't need a big backyard because all their kids were gone. There was lots of people that saw this as an opportunity to own something at the expense of not having to maintain all that stuff. So, because it would have cost them as much money to maintain this beautiful space individually than it cost to cumulatively maintain it through their HOA. So, yes, there's a cost that comes with that. There's an organizational, whenever you're building at density, it's not as simple as running a stub from your sewer and water to your lot and tying in. It's not just dropping a lateral. Those fourplexes were poured with 4 foundations at a time because there was a lot of stuff in the ground around those fourplexes. So, but when you can put 12 units an acre and you can pencil 12 units an acre instead of 3, those complexities seem to melt away once a developer embraces that concept. This particular development was built by one of the leading upscale builders in the Central Valley, Wathan Castanos. So it made sense to them, and it made sense to the buyers. That's all I can really share. I would add too, you can't buy that in Bakersfield. That's the problem.
The product doesn't exist in Bakersfield.
It does not. I think we have 29 lots in Belcourt that are alley loaded, but only one side of the alley has garages on it, which made no sense to me. There's no added value there in terms of being able to add density. And they are very popular. They sold like that because a lot of people don't want a yard to maintain. I didn't want a yard to maintain. I don't have any kids in my backyard on swing sets anymore. Just, there comes a time when we look to have variation of housing types that our individual lifestyles can align with. In Bakersfield, we have large lot homes and apartments. That's the missing middle. That's why I'm not building 3,000 units a year, in my humble opinion. Because a city of 410,000 people should be able to average about 3,000 units a year without trying too hard. If they're building what people want.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Boyle. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. I have so many thoughts and questions and comments. I'm regretting my protocol of going last because I've been wanting to jump in. I do want to just shout out, I do think, with respect, Mr. Boyle, there have been a handful of successful infill projects in the city of Bakersfield. I think the Vineyards example by the Marketplace is an example from the 80s. I think University Park, Ming and Gosford, Belladagio across from Centennial, the Helms that front the main street of Belcourt. So I think part of the problem is when we other density, we don't see a local connection. And I think it's really important to look even at central neighborhoods and how they function to see that we are a community that can do density. We just have not, that muscle just is not flexed like it can. And so I just want to give credit to those projects that have proved successful. I think you've said something very interesting, and I have like 20 points I could talk about, but I think to me the biggest thing that keeps coming up in the presentation, thinking of Commissioner Neal's question of what we can do to help as a commission, what your department can do to help developers. And to me, the issue of the municipal code keeps coming up in my head. I think if we go back to the presentation image of the different housing types, all the different housing models that you demonstrated, the missing middle, but not the presentation from Madera. Yeah, this slide. So I think, one thing that I think is interesting about this slide is, so our zoning is somewhat old school. We have a CC and a CB zone that allows more diversity and infill, but currently those zones, except for one community in far west Bakersfield, stop at F Street, stop at California, stop at Union, and stop at, is it 24th or Golden State? But basically, it's basically downtown. And what I think is interesting about this slide is outside of those zones, only one of these projects could be built with our municipal, without asking for some sort of variance. They're either too close to the street, too tall, their density exceeds the allotted amount. We don't zone multifamily housing at the scale at what these lots are shown. ADUs have to be half the size of their main structure, so the upper left wouldn't work. And so I think it's really important as we develop a housing element that when you see inspirational images, we compare the data with what we require from developers. Because, I mean, these projects are great and inspirational, but our municipal code doesn't allow them to be built in 98% of our city, unless it was surrounded by a sea of parking, 45 feet setback from the street.
And only then with some sort of discretion.
Yeah, with only some sort of discretion. And so I think it's, I think it's interesting in the housing conversation is to me would be kind of, it's important to know how are we updating the municipal code and not just the density allowances, but things like setback. Like to me, there are so many arbitrary setbacks that are based on aesthetic and this idea of a front lawn that are not tied to fire life safety. They are not tied to road visibility, which are, they're not tied to public utility easements. They are just purely based on the idea that when I see a house, I want it to be 25 feet back from the street, which has no quality, there's no, and so to me, kind of working through those issues, like the other one that gets me is in denser zones, we require a 45-degree line that starts at the property line and works its way back, and your building cannot encroach on that line. So if you're doing a 4-story project, it needs to be 60 feet back from the street, which means that you are not creating a walkable street. You are creating, arterials in a forest. That's the vision, is not the lower right corner. So to me, it's really important, I think, that we, as a commission, I would love to hear workshops and updates on that process, because to me, if developers aren't even able to do what we want them to do without an intense amount of discretionary review, even in that, we don't typically take PCD plans and allow them to completely bypass our laws. We might let them encroach 18 inches into a 20-foot setback. And so to me, if the answer, the housing numbers are interesting because it reveals that housing at any scale is desirable in our community. And if the easiest thing for us to develop is large lot single family, because the requirements we put on them are simple, the zoning approval process is simple, then if we're pro housing and pro development, we need these projects to be as easy if we're going to stay pro development. That's kind of the flip coin to saying let's make larger houses harder, is like, well, let's eliminate barriers. And so I would just be curious in that process, because I think, so I'd be curious, Mr. Boyle and Mr. Johnson, kind of as that process unfolds, because I do think that's an interesting thing for the public to have an opportunity to come and hear updates. And so I was just curious how that process, the anticipated timeline, how it would lay out, how holistic the view of this is.
I'll speak to that. Thank you.
That's only my first question. Sorry.
Because the ordinance is really fast-tracked, there's a finite opportunity for a comment. We're going to be scheduling the first stakeholder session, and I get a sense that that you may want to have some touch points after that first stakeholder session. Then after that, we'll go to the Planning and Development Committee, and that's a public meeting to look over their draft, take in their comments. We'll have a subsequent additional stakeholder session. Then we will have an additional Planning and Development Committee to look at pretty much a finalized draft. Then that draft will come to you and subsequently onto the City Council. And it is the expectation in intent to provide for streamlined processes for all densities consistent with state law. There will be opportunities for objective standards where if you can build the objective standard, you have a streamlined process. So by the same token, there'll be traditional opportunities for individuals who maybe have something that doesn't align with objective standards or even the reduced setbacks that we'll propose, because there will be significant reductions in setback in many of those zones. Then you'll still have opportunities through the PUD process that an individual with a unique design criteria could still come to the Planning Commission and vet that through a discretionary process.
So as far as I'm hearing, so basically the update of the municipal code is really tied to the update of the housing element of the general plan.
That's
so it's
correct.
not something that we'd really see changed until 2024 or 2025?
It'll start, it'll start in 2024. After adoption, there's 30 days.
Okay.
30 days to it being active.
Which I guess isn't even really that long from now. It's already March. Okay, but
It is not very long from now. You're absolutely right.
It'll go fast. Because I think, one thing, when you were calling out densities and the need, I mean, our different multifamily zone densities, the max densities are pretty rural still. I think like the image on the lower right where you can't see a parking lot in any way, shape, or form, I mean, that density greatly exceeds a 30 acre per, if everything is built out at that scale. If it's combined with single family, it would kind of, but I would just be very curious. I think to me, I would be interested in future presentations where images like this are presented, if a density allotment could be shown in tandem, because I think that, we're offering 10, let's offer 20. Is 20 still a density that would achieve this kind of vision and density and walkability? Because I think if the idea is dense housing, I think we just recently clarified language in the central district because we were allowing 185-story buildings, or not stories, 185-foot buildings, but we were only allowing a floor area to site area ratio of 4:1. So unless you were building a fifth of the site, you could never achieve that height. And I think, looking for whether it's like, is the city considering any like form-based code or anything that really allows max density that's a little bit,
You're referencing floor area ratios, and the floor area ratios were struck from the ordinance in the CB and CC zones.
Yeah,
it was
so
really the only impediment to development in the downtown core, save for a parking standard. And we're looking hard at parking standards. I think what I'd like to see is those projects coming to you across your dais as part of a project that meets the new development standards codes, because I think that projects that will come across your dais will be able to meet those codes, perhaps in a by right setting.
Well, I guess a better question, because I didn't mean to talk about the central zone in light of the central zone, but we recently just removed an impediment to create the walkable urban max envelope that we can permit in the downtown area. Are we doing similar things for multi-housing, mixed-use developments, commercial zones outside of the downtown core? Because if our vision is walkability, life, it seems like that the impediments of a developer wanting to max out a site, but then saying, oh, I've reached my density, so now I'm going to put in a large swath of landscape, feels kind of similar to what we just acknowledged was an impediment to downtown, an area we've expressed wanting to promote density. And so is that logic being kind of exported to the other parts of our city?
Short answer?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Great. And then, yeah, I think, so yeah, I think being updated on the municipal code update, it sounds like that will come after the housing, just because I think that to me is a lot of, until then we're kind of at a.
No, you will see the ordinance in various stages that it has to be completed in advance of the housing element update.
Okay.
We don't have the required densities to have a certifiable housing element. And we also have nested zones. So what you do in an R4, what you do in an R1 zone, you could do in an R4 zone. That's also not going to get across the finish line with HCD. So you have a kind of a dual-pronged approach to housing ordinance update, but ultimately it's a one-pronged approach. You can perceive it as being the city stepping into the 21st century in residential zoning, and you'd be right. We haven't updated our zoning code since the 20th century, except in very small pieces. But at the same time, there are lots of ordinances adopted by the state today that we're not reflective of. We have no floors, only ceilings in all of our residential zones. What you do in the R1, you can do in the R2 and the R3 and the R4. There is no high and low zone, just as one of the examples that isn't consistent with HCD in terms of a known density. When they prepare the realistic capacities, when their housing element, they want a realistic capacity. And when you can build R1 density in the R4 zone, to say that you're going to get 17.42 units out of that piece of land is a misnomer, because you could get 4 or 2. So we look at it in 2 ways. We want to be more development friendly. We need, per state law, to update our ordinance to be more reflective of state law, which provides for more streamlined opportunities for residential development. Many of the things you're saying have to be in this zoning update because they're state law. And you know, we want to embrace that law, and we want to make it work to the best advantage of the city of Bakersfield.
Great. And in that zoning update, are new zones being considered by any chance?
Yes.
Okay.
I noted the R4, their density changes. R5 will be 30 units and above. Those are just specific to residential zones, because we don't have those zones and we need them just to qualify for our vacant sites inventory. And we'll also be doing mixed use zones. I noted those that will provide for mixed use opportunities in underutilized commercial corridors that a property owner may embrace the idea of multifamily as a component of development on those streetscapes. There's many corridors we've identified properties that would meet that need. So, and those are just, remember, we're only doing our residential standards. We won't address the remainder of our code until after our general plan is adopted, and that won't be until March or April of 2025. Then we'll need to update our zoning and our zoning ordinance to reflect the goals and policies within that general plan. Here, we really have to touch our zoning code for residential uses, because it is really a pathway to a certified housing element. And if you read the news, there are a lot of municipalities that don't have certified housing elements right now. There's a real struggle. And we don't necessarily want that struggle. We want to do what's necessary to have a certified housing element, and then to create pathways that are advantageous for our development community to continue to build in the fair city of Bakersfield.
Great. And then my last question is really just about funding. And to me, there seems in the RENA numbers to be an acknowledgement that there's not really a good path to get very low income and low income housing into California. I mean, it almost seems like a number that has no. And so, yeah, just be curious what's in the works at a state level, developer level, city level to try to address that, because to me it feels like the most aggressive number, because we are so far from any way, shape, or form of it being a reality that we're meeting. And so I was just curious what's in the pipeline.
I broke out a calculator, Chair Cater, and said, okay, I need to do 2,277 units of low and very low residential a year. And each of those units, I think I only said 250,000. Maybe there's an economy of scale if you're building all those units at once. I think I came out to something like $560 million that I would need to build those units annually. And if I multiplied that times 8, I was something like $6 billion. And you know, unfortunately, And this isn't, I'm not trying to pick on the state of California. I'm trying to comply with California law. Last thing I want to do is pick on the bully in the room. But when we announce state dollars that are penciled towards affordable housing, we're have much fanfare over $40 million. And $40 million doesn't build a lot of units of affordable housing when you're looking at it as a statewide crisis. Understand that economics are economics, but I don't know where the rest of that money comes from. We do a good job capitalizing on the opportunities the state and federal government provide to us, and we use PSVS dollars dedicated to our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The state does also give us about $1.8 million in PLHA funds that are byproducts of SB2 from about 3 years ago. We assemble those dollars and we competitively award projects annually to keep those dollars in the pipeline, but that's not nearly enough. That's my point. It's not nearly enough.
Is the city seeing any interest or working towards kind of tiny homes, or because I think the delivery model that you mentioned is very similar to kind of a high quality, high cost build of housing that is, for $40 million, you can't get that many units. Are there any other delivery models like tiny homes or quick, small lots where the entry point per cost per door is a little bit more, is less than, some of these projects that are quite, like Commissioner Neal mentioned have a lot of stipulations that make their delivery model particularly expensive?
I haven't seen that concept come to Director Johnson's counter. I would argue that, first, I've heard that tiny homes cost a lot more money than you would think they cost. But I'm not arguing the concept of tiny homes. We just haven't had anyone come to our counter and say, I'd like to do this. When you have to provide individual stubs to every one of those units, it starts getting really expensive in terms of the infrastructure to serve it. And it makes a whole lot more sense to do studio units that are 400 square feet in single structures with a single stub to the street. Your economy of scale and your costs of construction go down exponentially, and you have a more traditional build. I think that's what gets in the way of tiny homes, personally.
We'll compare structural framing costs and maybe get back to you. Multifamily housing is not cheap either. That's great. Those are my questions. I really appreciate the presentation. I would just really encourage anything we can do in the municipal process to, it still sounds like we're in a situation where we want developers to do something that is more difficult to do than doing what we've always done, and that to me seems a little bit of a paradox. And so I would be very interested in how the city is moving towards being holistically developer friendly in not necessarily taking away the rights of developers doing traditional housing at traditional lot sizes, but maybe really closing the complexities, even just from an administrative logistics for some of these projects that would bring a diversity of housing to Bakersfield.
Chair Cater and commissioners, appreciate all your comments. They're all very valuable.
I'd like to just add a quick point to that. I would say then it'd be important to get involved and not wait for it to come to your commission. Get involved early. I know with the housing element, there's a housing plan in there that has 40+ pages of strategies to incentivize and support housing. When that comes for public review, get involved early. Don't wait for it to come across your board. And again, as Director Boyle noted, you're challenged with the business as usual model. That's not going to work anymore in the city of Bakersfield.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Boyle.
Thank you.
Was there any other commissioner comments? Sorry, I should go back to that. Nope. Seeing no additional commissioner comments. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 8, communications.
Does staff have any communication items?
Real quick, take 10, 15 minutes of your time. Looking at Looking at the rest of the month and into April, we do have the Planning Commissioners Academy at the end of this month. If you have any issues with that, please let me know. We will have a Planning Commission meeting on April 6th, again on April 20th. And as Director Boyle noted, we will have a kind of a joint session with Council on April 26th. I mentioned that last month. There'll be some more details on that coming. And finally, I'd like to recognize our secretary, Ms. Martinez. She's actually one of our associate planners, and she's working solo tonight. So I appreciate everyone's patience on that, and you did a really good job.
Thank you. Very much appreciated. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 9, commission comments.
Any commissioners have any comments?
Yes, I would like to say to Mr. Johnson, happy birthday from all of us up here. I think that's important to recognize a special day like that, so happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I wouldn't want to spend my birthday any other way than being up here in front of the commission.
I thought Commissioner Wade was going to lead the song.
In falsetto? Yeah, that was a happy birthday, Mr. Johnson. Would I be, if I were more tech savvy, I was going to make a compilation of every meeting you've had this last year, where you're pretty much making the same gesture, presenting something, but I'm not that tech savvy, so see it in your mind and appreciate. Yeah. Do any other commissioners have any comments?
I have one comment. The email you sent out today with the agenda for the Planning Academy only had the Wednesday on it. It did not have all the days. But I was able to follow your link to the website and get those, so I guess that's a wash, but just
It was a test.
Okay. You were just checking to see if I was going to read it? All right.
I will, I'll go back and see about downloading it again and resending it.
All right. Thank you. Seeing no additional commissioner comments, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 10, adjournment.
This meeting is adjourned at 7:06.